So let's start recording now. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this third webinar of the summer sessions from Scale. Very interesting webinar today. It's the third in a row. It's a little bit later than expected, but that was due to some circumstances. I hope everybody is able to join today because we have a very interesting story, two stories actually, and it's the consumer perspective that we are talking about today. So we have two very nice presentations based on studies, what the consumer thinks on smart charging and vehicle to grid. What are their preferences? What are incentives that they expect and maybe already have? What kind of motivations they have on smart and V2X charging? So we have two interesting speakers about that. First, Ellen Heap. She's from the Dutch EV Drivers Association, and they did together within the project of Scale a very nice study on the perspective of the EV driver on smart charging and V2X, and she did it together with Elbil, which is the Norwegian Drivers Association. After Ellen, we will get Evangelos Karpofoulou. He's from the National Technical University of Athens, and he's from a sister project of Scale, which is eCharge for Drivers. He's also the final responsible for that project. And also they did very nice research about the consumer perspective, the end user perspective, basically a lot about smart charging and also some about V2X. The agenda for today is that we will have both speakers first do their presentations, and after that we will set up a Q&A. And that's basically the questions that you can put in the chat. So please put your questions in the chat for both speakers. If you have a specific question, for example, for Ellen, please also put behind it that it's a question for Ellen, and same for Evangelos. So let's start with the first presentation of Ellen, and please put your questions if you have them in the chat, and then we will ask the questions on behalf of you. So then you will get the answers based on the presentation and maybe the extra information that can be given from those questions. I want to now give Ellen the floor. Ellen, welcome to this webinar, and maybe you can share your screen and start with your presentation.
Yes, thank you so much, Edwin. And I'm delighted that today the topic is about consumer, because when doing this research, we also found out, as a sort of side topic, that there's so much being studied on technical issues and technical geeky stuff, but about consumers, what just normal EV drivers think and want, is that's so much less research being done. So we were very happy with this topic. So thank you so much, Edwin. What we did, and we is me from the Dutch EV drivers together with the Elbil, the Norwegian EV drivers. We did this survey on how do electric drivers in different European countries perceive V2X and smart charging. And we did that together with the help of Jiva, and I don't know if you know Jiva, but Jiva is the Jiva is the Global EV Alliance. It's a sort of grassroots organizations of 60 EV drivers associations all around the world, mostly in Europe, but it's like a very interesting group of EV associations just to get to know what the state of the art of the EV drive topics are in all the countries. So we did a survey and we asked European countries to participate. There were about 20 European countries that had EV drivers, filling in this survey, but we only thought 7 European countries had enough respondents to be put in this survey. So that's why we focus on these 7 countries. And what we also noticed, if you ask questions to EV drivers, you also want to have some context from the country. So we did some in-depth interviews with representatives from all these countries. That is also in the report. You can read about it. And of course, we did a search to what is written in the academic world about this topic. So this is all about what is in the report. I'm going to give a sort of summary what is in the report. But I will do that in 3 steps. I will first look at the survey with you, and then we have a closer look at the 2 topics, and then some conclusion from our side. if you look at the survey, those are the number of respondents. What you can see is that, you know, like the Norway and the Netherlands, of course, have more respondents than smaller countries. But to not, you know, let Norway and Netherlands dominate the results, we looked at all the different countries and their perspective. So you can sort of take comparisons. And of course, if you look at the market shares, it also says something about, you can see there are some EV mature countries like Norway, the Netherlands, and Austria, and also with Portugal, but there's also some new EV countries. And it is interesting, I think, if you look at those topics, V2X and smart charging, to look at the context of, you know, how long have they been driving electric and what are the experiences of EV drivers. So we first go to smart charging, and we had some statements, and what you sort of can see is that most of the people are in all the countries are sort of familiar with smart charging. Is one of the outstanding things here is that if you look at Norway, for example, which is the blue, the dark blue line, from all the countries, for them, for the EV drivers in Norway, it's the least clear what smart charging is. And that is something that struck out at this statement. And we sort of explained that being in a EV mature country, in Norway, you see much more majority drivers. It's not, you know, the early adopters or the innovators, the people that are interested in really all new things happening around EV. But in Norway, it's a mature market. And you can see that sort of complicated topics like smart charging is then less in top of mind. So that sort of explains also the complexity of having all things like smart charging and V2X being mass produced in the different countries. But on the overall, you can say people know what smart charging is. And if you ask them, are you happy with it? Well, then, you know, of course, there is a less, it differs in the different countries. But I think this is a sort of positive sign about the smart charging. And we also asked them, how do EV drivers charge smart? You see a lot of figures here. You can read it in a report afterwards on the website. I just take out the big issues on that. And what you can see is that most of the people in different countries, they control the charging of the car through the car's app. And the least response was that the public street charger controls it. But this is a sort of, you can see the differences also between countries like Portugal and Poland, where they have apparently, they use more the car's app than other countries. If you look at the reasons why people drive smart, there's two reasons that struck out. It's because it's cheaper, which is of course no surprise, and also because it's greener. I can use my solar panels. That's what most of the countries said. This is interesting. And what we found out when we had the in-depth interviews, that those two reasons are in most cases the same, because what you can see is that Norway says because it's cheaper and because it's greener for them gives a low percentage. That is because in Norway, all the electricity, all the energy is green already. So for them, it's not a reason. The cheapness is a reason. If you look, for example, at Poland or Hungary, they say because it's greener, but in fact, what they want to say is it's greener, so it is cheaper for me. So, you know, that reason for why people drive smart is most of the time it's the reason that it's cheaper. And yeah, well, you can see the other things in the report about this. We also asked some people about, you know, if you look at smart charging, how does it cope with having control? You can see this is like overall in all countries, you can see that they want to have control over the smart charging sessions. They want to have insight, and it should be easy. So I think those three items is really struck out with all EV drivers from all countries. These statements we thought also were interesting because, you know, if you want to promote smart charging, what sort of topics are important? And if you can see that if charging sessions would offer 100% green power, that is interesting. For example, in a country like the Netherlands, where that is not naturally the case, it can be a reason for people to charge smart. And of course, financial benefits are also very important. Those are probably normal reasons, but it's good to have asked it and the different EV drivers. If you look at who would you trust, by handing over the control of the charging of your car, you can see we asked a couple of different parties, but you can see that the car manufacturer is in some countries very reliable. And in other countries, it's the grid operator and the electricity provider. And this is really due to the context in the different countries. What you can see, for example, we had an in-depth conversation with Poland, where you can see that there are still, the grid operators are in the hands of like sort of the more old-fashioned communistic legacy. And you can see that more modern car manufacturers, for example, like Tesla, they are trusted more. But in countries where the grids, where the grid operators are modern, are really eager to electrify together with the EV drivers, you can see that they are most trustworthy. And one of the conclusions we got here is that local context is so interesting. You cannot say in all countries it's the same. It's not one size fits all in this part. If you go to V2X, you see a lot of figures on this page, but I want to just point out a couple of them. We ask them, if you have to use the battery of your car for something else than powering your own car, what would you find interesting? And what you can see is that really struck out that powering the home is really the 1, 2, and 3 reason to do that. That is, like from all the countries, it's the most important reason, because that's what struck out. And we also asked if you, for example, use the EV, the power of your EV to power another person. That was like the least interesting thing that people would think. So this gives a sort of impression of what sort of arguments can be interesting. And we also found out weird conclusion in that. For example, in the Netherlands, there was this extremely high percentage that said, well, we want to give electricity back to the grid to contribute to a stable energy network. It struck out from the other countries. And for example, in Norway, they said, well, none of these options seem very relevant to me. So we also think this has to do with the local context, that, for example, in the Netherlands, because this aligns with our own charging survey, what you see is that bidirectional charging is a very hot topic. And we don't know exactly why it is a hot topic, but it might have to do with our dense electricity network, our good charging network already, so that we sort of, are in the phase of going further than just smart charging. But we don't know exactly, but there is differences in the countries. And for example, if you look at the Norwegian situation, that none of these options seem very relevant to me. That can also has to do that, there's more a late majority and majority people consider it a sort of mainstream, and they do smart charging and that's it. So there's differences in different countries in that one. We also ask people, what are your concerns if you look at V2X? And we had some reasons: the battery degradation, loss of warranty, loss of data, fear that the car won't be charged enough, lack of being in control, that you don't get enough financial compensation. And what we can see is that the 2 reasons in the most countries were the battery degradation and that the fear that the car won't be charged enough by time of leave. So those are the 2 main factors in all the countries. But what we also can see, if you look at battery degradation, for example, you can see that in sort of the more EV mature countries like Norway and the Netherlands and Austria, that this percentage is really lower than in, let's say, the new EV countries like Hungary, Poland, Slovenia. So, we thought it is in the more EV matured countries, people are used to having EVs and they trust the battery more because they've been driving that maybe or already for 7, 8, 9 years. So You can see a difference there in what fears there are if you look at V2X. Well, I'm going to come to the conclusions here. What we see from this survey is that there's a very high willingness to use smart charging. Not all consumers are satisfied, but that it depends on the situation in the countries. But what they agree on, it should be easy and user-friendly, and they want to have control, insight, and financial gain. And I think we also said that addressing these needs is crucial for the widespread adoption of these things. And I already said the conclusion that it is not one size fits all. You have to really look at the local and regional context in the country to decide on how are you going to promote those two technologies. If you look at the level of trust, you can say that OEMs receive the overall highest level of trust. And many respondents also stated that they only trust themselves and no third party. So that is also interesting. And because it's an important barrier to overcome if smart charging is to be adopted. If you look at V2X, there's always in all the countries, there's a strong preference for V2 home options. So that people can use their solar panels. And I think that is a very interesting, at the Dutch survey, charging survey, we see exactly the same, that this vehicle to home is a really interesting mini grid in that people want to produce for themselves. If you talk to the vehicle to grid, it's not, people don't, there's not a large willingness unless, of course, there are financial benefits. And I think those are two important factors for V2X. 8 out of 10 have concerns, talking about battery degradation. And if you look at what sort of concerns they have, it is the potential battery degradation, it's the handling over control of charging, and it's the benefits. So those are really 3 things that you can see in all the countries. I already stated that in the earlier sheets that it varies a lot among the countries, and we also think it's crucial to differentiate between smart charging at being one thing and V2X being the other thing, because there are distinct concepts that require different strategies for adoption, we think. And it is important that, don't throw everything in one concept, because those are different concepts and they have to be communicated differently. And that also reflects the different debates in the different countries. And also, I started my survey with this conclusion that what we found out in the literature review, that there's a lack of consumer-orientated research. And, like really what you see, most parties say, well, we've got apps that, that smart charging is really easy, but there's so much apps that you have to download, being an EV driver, for example, that there should be more than that. It should be really the woman on this image. She should be able to do that. And if she can do it, we can all do it. But that requires really more marketing communication, look at those concepts. And we think that this is sort of crucial. So you have to sort of deep dive in that. And maybe that's one of the conclusions as well, that, this is just a survey being done in 7 countries, but I think there should be more surveys in this field. This is, Edwin, where I want to stop the explanation of the survey. And I haven't looked at the questions, but I hope there are some questions about it.
Thank you, Alan. Very interesting. I think a nice story, and exactly what you say, differences in the different countries. Also in scale, we saw, for example, we have a lot of use cases in the different countries. And then we also see from the stakeholder side and from the technology side, and also sometimes the legal side, that we all think we are Europe, but within Europe, there are a lot of differences.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's also the consumer notices that. That is what you see here. Very interesting. We will come back to you when we have questions. I saw one question now in the chat. So maybe all the others are a little bit thinking about your presentation now and setting up questions. So let's see after the presentation of Evangelos what is the status of all those questions. I will give now the floor to Evangelos, and also to the audience. Please put in the chat your questions for Ellen, and also after the presentation for Evangelos. Evangelos, can you share your screen and do your part of the webinar and the presentation? Yes, there it is.
Great. Thank you very much, Edwin. Thank you also very much for the invitation to present the work that we are doing in the Charge for Driver project. And the purpose, the scope of today's presentation is to give, let's say, an overview of the user concerns and how as regards the charging experience, the charging technologies and services that are provided to them, and how the Charge for Driver project aims to overcome and suggest and produce solutions that will limit these concerns. So mainly the scope, just to give a brief introduction and in order to better know the project, Charge for Drivers is a project started in 2020, and it aims to create user-centric and user-friendly charging solutions in terms of technologies and services in order to improve the user experience towards charging. And when we are talking about technologies, there are three main directions we are focusing. As you can see in the right hand of this slide, we are considering a new infrastructure with innovative functionalities like smart charging, V2G, plug and charge functionality. We are also focusing on the service layer to improve the accessibility and the user experience of the EV drivers during the charging, before charging, during the charging, and after the charging, with enhanced information. And finally, in order to provide an holistic solution to the users, we need to have tools for the optimal and efficient and sustainable planning of the e-mobility growth in terms of development of the public charging network. In order to create user-centric solutions, we need to place the user at the center, as the word is saying. And what does this mean? We need to understand deeply which are users' concerns, which are the obstacles for the users in order to purchase an electric vehicle instead of a conventional one. In the literature, it's true that there are many user surveys discussing this topic. Also, we did this survey back to 2021 in the Charge for Driver project. All the surveys more or less conclude to the same conclusions, which are the main user concerns. If you have a quick thinking of that, then you will conclude to the first four one: range, availability of charging station, charging speed, especially in terms of intercity travels, and the capital cost of purchasing an electric vehicle. These are the four main barriers that can be found in any survey as regards the user. Why I selected this specific survey from SBC company? Because this also tracks how these barriers are deviating as the years passes. So after comparing what was the barriers back to 2020 and comparing it with the current user barriers in 2023, you will see that the four main previous barriers in the right hand of this diagram has been decreased. And why? Because OEMs and all these EU projects provide solutions that aims to limit this barrier. So as regards the lack of the charging infrastructure, you can see that in many European countries, there is an extended charging network, especially for inner city trips, but needs to be done, further work needs to be done for intercity and inter corridors. As regards the range, the batteries have been progressed, the battery technologies have progressed, so the EV autonomous driving range is more or less similar to a conventional vehicle. So this shows how concerns are differentiating given the technological advancements and solutions that are provided by CPOs and TMSPs. Of course, there is a geographical, we should also consider the geographical dimension, because in northern part of Europe, the mobility is not so mature as in the northern European countries. So the user concerns are different. In case of increased maturity level, users need more services in order to improve their charging experience. But in areas, in countries where the e-mobility is at the very beginning steps, like in Greece, the key aspect is the lack of charging public infrastructure. I would like to give you some more insights as regards the survey that was conducting and why people are choosing EVs. And of course, some of these reasons are also combined to why people are selecting smart charging and V2G services. First of all, and prioritization to them is the environmental friendliness. That's why we are talking about green transportation, which is implied also by the EU and national policies, but also we are talking about the grid energy, because it is important not only to limit the direct CO2 emissions from the vehicle, but also users needs to be sure that the energy consumed to charge the battery is produced by renewable energy sources. And secondly is the energy efficiency and the low operating cost. The increased oil prices, fuel prices, compared to the energy prices. As regards the place to charge and when people are charging, because this affects also the implementation of different e-mobility services. And the key aspects when an EV user selects to charge the vehicle is, first of all, the low state of charge of the battery, because he needs to continue the trip. And secondly, especially at the beginning, when people get used to the electric vehicle, is whenever a charging station is available, in order to be sure that the driving autonomy of the vehicle is enough to serve all the their mobility needs. As the time passes and people get more used on the electric vehicle, it is seen that the charging sessions are more spare. So this means that instead of charging every day, you will see that the car can be charged every 3 or 4 weeks, or 2 or 3 weeks times maximum per week. Preferable charging options, it's the home charging. This is known, and this is also reported by the EV user response. Approximately 90% of the users charge their EVs primarily at their home, but also they wish to have publicly available chargers to charge their vehicles there. During the home charging, approximately the parking duration is 12 hours, which is quite enough to implement and offer different e-mobility services to the users, like smart charging, in order to minimize the charging cost, or to support and provide ancillary services to electricity grids or to the energy market. As regards the flexibility, do we have flexibility even in the smart charging concept? The answer is yes. We have flexibility wherever we can provide it at. In slow charging, we have around 1 hour up to 3 hours flexibility to be provided by the users at public charging station. And in case of fast charger, it's not the preferable, the provision of smart charging services, but here we have a time slot between 30 and 1 hour parking duration, where the user can provide services mainly for peak saving, not to consume the maximum charging power. As regards the sustainability of the investment, and these are data collected from real world, from CPOs, the occupancy of the charging station is low. Usually it's lower than 10%, and in some very rare cases, it can be increased up to 30%. So the investment still is not a viable investment in the public charging infrastructure. But why then CPOs invest on them? Because there is a need, there is a market need, and also they wish to create a market and an early market share for their company in order to be more competitive in the upcoming years. As regards the charging user preferences, users are willing to pay more if they wish to have a fast charging, or if they wish to be included in a smart charging, in terms not to pay more as cost, but to participate in such smart charging concepts in order to minimize the cost, or to increase their benefits as users. And an interesting thing that it was also mentioned previously is that as regards the EV drivers, they were mainly male, the ones at least that they responded to our survey, which means that new policies and new strategies should be included in order to involve women in the mobility ecosystem. How the e-charge for drivers aims to respond in all these barriers. As regards the high cost of the vehicle, we did an extended survey as regards incentives and tariffs. And in the majority of the European countries, incentives are in place for both purchasing an electric vehicle as well as for the installation of public charging infrastructure. This is important, and the request from the users is that this should remain not for a short period, but for a long in order to ensure the integration of a critical mass of electric vehicles in the countries. Also, dynamic pricing is becoming more and more popular. There is a survey in the Dutch area where almost half of the drivers wanted to have dynamic rates at public charging stations, following a similar concept as it happens with their home charging. And of course, it was a requirement from the user, the ad hoc payment. The payment at the charging station via a credit card or a mobile application, but without being engaged to any energy contract, to any e-mobility contract within EMSP. In order to minimize the cost of the vehicles, there are also other technological solutions or services. Technological solutions and services are the battery leasing, especially for light electric vehicles. So you can buy the vehicle without buying the battery. So you minimize the capital cost and you transfer it to the operational cost by leasing a battery for which you are not responsible as regards the degradation of the battery, and you ensure that you have a good state of health for the battery anytime. And also by providing V2G services, V2X, V2L, in general, V2 home services, you can increase your income or you can decrease the charging cost by exploring the dynamic prices. Here is a diagram showing that the cost for charging an electric vehicle is more or less always cheaper than the operation of the conventional vehicle. The gap between the prices of fuels and the electricity, for sure, it depends on the generation mix of each country. That's why, for example, in France, where nuclear power, which is cheap, exists, the charging prices are quite lower than the fuel prices. So the profits of the users are different based on the energy mix and the energy market at the local level. As regards the user acceptance, it is important in the request from the user to have a clear indication and clear information about the charging before, during the charging, and after the charging, the payment. So the information should always be provided to the user via mobile application, but also it is a request to have information on onboard screens on the charging station, especially concerning the energy prices for the charging. And in order to achieve this, all this enhanced information, and because different actors are involved, especially if we are talking about V2G, the crucial thing is interoperability. Every technology provider or service provider should follow the standards. We should discuss and interconnect everything via roaming platforms or protocols that enables the peer-to-peer exchange of the information. And also, it is good for a good user experience to have, let's say, this plug and charge functionality, which is the cardless authentication system, where the user just plugs the vehicle and all the transactions, authentication, economic, financial transaction, energy transactions are done automatically. Also, in order to improve the user accessibility and minimize the waiting time in front of a blocked and occupied charging station, the eCharge for Driver provides routing, booking, and smart charging services, which is something that is requested from the user, especially the routing, which is a usual habit for conventional vehicles, but also the booking. Finally, as regards the lack of the charging network, what is needed? First of all, to provide different technological solution to the user from public to private, but also from AC to DC, which defines also the duration of the charging process. We need to have efficient tools, especially for CPOs, in order to adequately develop their public charging infrastructure to serve the charging demands And in order to ensure sustainability, grid constraints should be considered, roaming facilities, and maintain incentives and advanced tarification schemes in order to incentivize users to use EV users to use properly the charging station. I will conclude with the next 2 slides about the smart charging services and some practical conclusions from the implementation of the smart charging in France, in Grenoble city by CEA. And these 2 diagrams are showing how the EV demand can be shifted via the smart charging process in order to have, let's say, a more correlated and synergetic operation between the PV production and the EV demand. In the bottom diagram, in the diagram at the bottom, you can see that the charging with the blocks, you can see that the EV charging starts as soon as the EV user arrives at the workplace, and the charging demand reaches the highest rate. And on the contrary, the PV production starts increasing at that time. And when the sun has the highest PV production, then you can see that the majority of the EVs are already fully charged and the charging demand is lower. This is the need to correlate the EV demand with the PV local production, create synergies in order to increase also the auto consumption at local level, either at home or at workplace. And this is the diagram. The upper diagram shows how the EV demand can perfectly fit to the PV production profile and have increased demand when we have increased PV production and lower demand when the PV production is lower. Some practical conclusion is that from the implementation, the smart charging use ratio was more than 90%, which means that it's a service that it is acceptable and exploitable by the EV users. More than 1,000 charging stations have already been carried out, which is very promising. And by that, we have 2 very interesting conclusions. First of all, the cost reduction was around 20%, which is crucial for the EV user. And also the self-consumption increased up to 95%. So this means that all the local production was consumed by the EVs, which is efficient not only for the user because it minimizes the cost, but also for the whole electricity system because it allows better integration of renewable energy resources and increases and facilitates the green transition policy that is implied by the European Commission. This is overall my presentation, and I hope that I didn't exceed much the time.
Thank you, Carlos. Great. I think it's very interesting to see what also actually is happening in the use cases that you showed at the last 2 sheets. Very interesting that. Maybe you can stop sharing your screen and then we can open the cameras also from Ellen, yourself, and me. And Ellen is already back, I see. Because there were some questions in the chat. And of course, the first questions were for Ellen, but let's see what are the questions. So the first one, Ellen, is from Pedro. And it's also one that I was a little bit worried about. Like, I'm also Dutch, I'm from the Netherlands, and we see that we have a lot of grid congestion already in the country. And can that be also related to the outcome of the results of your study? That, for example, in the Netherlands, you have these kind of issues, and maybe in Eastern European countries, it's a little bit less because they don't have a lot of charging stations already and lots of charging sessions. And maybe in Norway, the grid is totally different than in the Netherlands. Can you react a little bit on that first question?
Yeah, thank you so much, Edwin. Well, I don't pretend to know everything about it, but those are sort of the things that we are thinking about. It has to do with, for example, the grid congestion in the Netherlands that people, as Evangelos also stated from the Dutch charging survey, that dynamic pricing, most EV drivers in the Netherlands, said dynamic pricing is interesting, bidirectional charging is interesting. Even more than half of the EV drivers in the Netherlands say that bidirectional charging should be mandatory. So there is this sentiment that we should do something about the grid, but it is not just about the grid congestion, because the grid the problems with the grid is the congestion at certain times, at certain moments. If we all do smart charging, for example, in the Netherlands, if we would all do that, we would only have a problem at certain amounts on the day. So it is also about the national discussions, the way the policymakers present this problem. And I think so there's more to it than just the actual situation. It's also about the narrative in the country. And as you stated, for example, V2X is a very hot topic in the Netherlands. You know, everyone, all the EV drivers are really interested in that. It can also be the reason can also be that we have a sort of advanced charging infrastructure. So we are used to roaming from day one we started electric driving. So we are maybe more keen on new technologies in that field. In Norway, if you look at the situation in Norway, V2X is hardly a topic, you know. Smart charging for them is the way to do it. And they are able to do it. And they have less congestion. But I think it's also about this discussion. If you sort of know how to charge smart, why would you need V2X? So that's a higher discussion. And I also, what I sometimes see in all the events we go to, that we sometimes forget that EV drivers are normal people. You know, we talk about AC/DC and about most of the EV drivers have no clue. They don't understand how exactly things work. And new technologies like V2X sometimes for me blur the discussions in countries. And I know that, you know, car manufacturers are interested in these topics, but I think if, for example, we all as EV drivers would charge smart from tomorrow, and it's possible, you know, if you're sort of smartly doing our charging, we would, you know, why would we need V2X? Of course, this is very boldly stated. I know that there are interesting parts in it, but I sometimes also think that we as, you know, producers are working in this e-mobility industry. We could make life easier for a lot of EV drivers.
Thanks. Evangelos, maybe also you are involved in some different countries. Do you see there also the same kind of differences, like net congestion, the state of the net, of the grid, etc.?
Yes, it's true. I mean, even if you consider them from the user point of view, you will see that users request different things depending on the maturity level of the mobility. If you consider at a more national level, then you will see that the needs might be different. For example, in Sweden, they had the integration of many home chargers, which created problems with voltage unbalances. In Netherlands, they have, especially in Amsterdam, due to the integration of many charging stations and EVs due to taxes, they have issues concerning the peak demands from the grid. So they are the first one implementing a peak saving smart charging service offered in Amsterdam. In Greece, if you discuss with the DSO, in Greece we have 90% EV penetration. So if you discuss with the Greek distribution system operator, he will say that we don't have any issue. Let's discuss 5 to 10 years ahead if we need any smart charging in Greece. So you see the different philosophy, the different logic behind, and everything depends on the deployment level and the maturity of e-mobility.
That's also related to the next question, which is from the leader. We talk all about V2X and smart charging. Smart charging is even also mentioned in the new regulations, so from the European Commission. But if you look at the different countries within the European Union and also broader, with Norway as such, is there a common understanding and a definition of what smart charging is? And yeah, V2X also, you have V2 Home, you have V2 Grid, you have V2 anything. Can we get maybe in the next couple of years, or maybe is it already there? Is there a sort of a common understanding what we mean by these terms? Or is it still very complex and blurry? I'm not sure. Maybe who wants to react first? Because I think it's in both your studies, it's an issue, right?
Yeah. I think it's a very good question, but I don't think we can reach a European understanding and definition because there's so many parties involved and there's so many interests. And I think if we really want to have an understanding by EV drivers of those two concepts, I think you have to look at national discussions and national ways of dealing with energy. For example, we did the survey also in Slovenia. Slovenia is from history a very well electrified country, because they do, they don't have a lot of coals. They just, they use electricity for the heat pumps and for also. So load balancing is an understanding that they have been dealing with for a lot of years already. So for them, it's really easy to understand the concept of smart charging, because they do that all the time in their homes. And so if you sort of tune in local conversations, I think that's what it should be. And sometimes if I'm at this conferences and you see V2X and V2L and V2 home and V2 car and V2 whatever, to barbecue, V2 to karaoke set, I don't know. And it blurs. So I think if one thing that I can answer is you have to tune in with the local conversations.
Isn't that also one of the reasons that, for example, in your survey, you saw that people are most interested in V2 Home because they understand that the best, or isn't that the case?
I think I like that. To be honest, I forgot. I think V2 Home is something that people like, the mini grid. That is what they can understand. They've got benefits from either green energy or cheap energy. The way you mention it, it doesn't matter, but that's how they understand it. And I think if you want to sort of get these things across, it should be in that home situation. That's what people understand.
It's exactly. It's close to what they can think about. I have also another, and that's a practical example for myself, because in the Netherlands we think each city, each region is doing the same thing. That's not the case. We were a couple of weeks ago in the city of Utrecht, which is also part of the Scale project, and there they allow people at the open on the public charging points to, be for whole day or longer at the charging station. Well, in the city where I live, I have to get my car out of the charging station when the session stopped. Otherwise, I get a fine. And I asked to the people in Utrecht, why do you do that? And they say, yeah, we are already preparing on smart charging. We have it, but also on V2X, because when a session is ended, it will not say that we cannot use the car as part of the energy grid. So there you see differences also on the local level, like in the cities, how they act on charging and grid congestion. And that's even in the Netherlands in two different cities, total different structure there. Do you also see that maybe also Evangelos, where you have your cities involved in the different smart charging use cases? Do you also differences like that in your cities?
Mm-hmm. Well, I will start first of all with the discussion about the if people can understand in the same way smart charging. I'm not sure that it is easy to explain exactly what is smart charging. I think what people and EV users are looking for is the motivation. I need to do something. What would be the impact? How I will benefit from that? So if you explain that you will need to make some sacrifices, or you need to be included in a smart charging service because you will make the energy greener, so you will be more environmentally friendly, or you will be benefit because the energy cost will be lower if you don't charge right now, but if you start the charging in a few hours ahead, the cost will be decreased by 20, 10, or 50%, whatever. So I think that the message to the user is not that we have some algorithms behind, all the actors are communicating, exchanging information. It's the motivation. It's a smart charging for increasing your greener footprint of your vehicle, improving the environmental footprint of your vehicle, or you minimize the costs. And secondly, it is important, what is the impact on the user habits? So if you can manage my charging process within my non-commuting period without affecting my driving autonomy or my driving profile, because I need my battery fully charged at 7 o'clock when I leave my work, then the user will not be affected. So it will accept this. So it is a matter of what is the benefits for the user, and if this affects somehow its daily life.
Thanks. Ellen, maybe reaction also on the question on those different cities, and also a little bit related that some of the people in the chat say, don't forget that V2 Home is also better financial business case for the EV owner versus public V2G. So related to the public chargers, in this case, for the owner and for home, the business case is better than in public domain. Do you agree on that? Do you have already figures on that? Maybe both of you, maybe first Ellen.
I don't have any figures on it, but I think Christian is right. It's of course it's the better, and it's the more logical business case. But what we, for example, saw in the Dutch EV drivers charging survey, which is different than this survey, is that home charging is also sort of a white spot for most EV drivers. If you ask normal EV drivers, for example, I don't know exactly what sort of charging thing I should have, and I've got an app for my smart charging, but I don't really exactly know how it works and how it connects. So sort of V2 Home is something that you sort of can control and get a grip on, and I think that and there is a direct financial revenue for that, of course. But I think if it's already so complicated at the home situation, it will be even more complicated on the public or smart or the fast charging option. So, and for your question for the cities, I don't know. I haven't done that. The only thing that we see in the charging survey that we did is pricing, that if you go charge in Utrecht, then you charge sometimes 20 or 30 euro cents cheaper than in Amsterdam, and that is a completely story that you cannot tell. I mean, how can you explain that? There are so many big differences between the cities in the Netherlands already.
Yeah, that's the issue of the
another
charging
issue.
price, right? And the
Yeah.
combination with the MSP card. And then if you don't even have the insight in that, how can you then calculate in that domain what you earn with smart charging? I think that's also a little bit more complicated than at home. So yeah.
Yeah.
Evangelist, do you have also cases like that? That the home situation is maybe better for people, for the EV owner? And what about the case, the business case for the CPO and the energy providers, for example? Do you see also there that there is already a good case on smart charging and V2X, or do you have issues on that?
To be honest, it's a little bit tricky to say that it is better as a financial business case. There are different business use cases for sure. If we wish to approach this statement from the regulatory point of view, it's easier to have V2G at this moment rather V2G. For example, in Greece, V2 Home is allowed because we are talking about behind the meter application. So it is an application like the auto consumption application, but the V2G is not allowed. There is no regulatory framework allowing you to inject energy to the grid at public parking spaces. And this is also the reality in the majority of the EU countries, apart from Netherlands, which is another chapter. It's difficult to say that it is a better financial business case. I'm not fully understand why, in which sense this statement is said by Christian. But what I can say is that V2G and V2X are different concepts with different business opportunities behind. V2X is limited only to the house, but V2G is a more wider service which can be provided to different stakeholders. It can be ancillary services to the system operator. It can be ancillary services to the energy market. So the business opportunities behind V2G are wider, and you may have more margins for profit. But right now, there are not the mechanism to fully exploit the V2G functionality.
We have maybe a solution for one of the issues, Ellen, because in Norway, they have already hydrogen or hydropower, of course, to balance the grid. So therefore, they have less need for V2G. So maybe that's also why the Norwegians are not so into the V2G issues in this. So that's a solution that Ian
I don't know if that
has.
is the
Norway
only
has a
reason.
different situation than the Netherlands, of course.
I don't know if that's I think it is an important reason, but it there's more to it. I think it's just if you want to sort of, get these two concepts out on the European market, I think it's too easy to say, well, in Norway, they've got that solution. I think it also has got to do with, um, in Norway, you've got a big majority that is driving cars, and they don't want to think about difficult concept like V2X. And so I think it is also a matter of how complex you want to make things. And so I think that is also something that you have to take in common. And I think if we talk about V2X, one of the concepts I always think as well is, okay, when with what car can I do it right now, And everyone's saying, yeah, next year there will be more models, but I mean, we're waiting for it. It is in certain situations. So I sometimes think it's like a play for us, for the businesses in e-mobility. Like, okay, there's this new thing, but there's two, and I think normal EV drivers are another category that we should approach on a different level. And if we already start talking about V2X already now in this year, and that we say that the majority of the Dutch EV drivers want the bi-directional charging and they want to have it mandatory, we forget that it's not possible now. So I mean, what are we discussing?
That's exactly also what Evangelos said. Exactly, yeah. So for both of you, of course, the studies were in a very early stage of these developments. This is also related to one of the questions, because do you do your studies more and more maybe in the next coming periods? And for example, also in countries like UK, Spain, Germany, France, so that we can get also an overview from those in the next couple of years?
Yeah, that's Anush that asked it.
Yeah.
I know that, well, in the Netherlands, we do sort of in the national basis, we do a lot on surveying on smart charging and those V2X possibilities. And in other countries, we don't see such an emphasis on these topics. But I think in the Global EV Alliance, where all the EV drivers organizations are aligned, you can see there's a big interest in it. So I expect there will be other countries during this, but for this topic on scale, we didn't plan to do it in next year in other countries as well.
Thanks. And you, Evangelos, what is the time plan for future in your study or your project?
In its for Driver project, we are now in the demonstration phase. We have started demonstrating the smart charging services as well. So the plan is the first half of next year to have a user survey in order to track the user experience and the user acceptance on these services. And the focus on the smart charging will be on 3 countries. It will be in Spain, in Barcelona, where we would like to see how smart tariffs, in order to avoid peak demands, are accepted from the EV users. In France, in Grenoble, we are testing the auto consumption concept, so correlating the EV demand with the PV production at workplaces. And in Luxembourg, we have another approach, which is a gamification approach, where people are trying to be part of a game. The winner will have some prizes like iPads, etc. And the greener, the one that has more green certificates in the charging, will get the prize. So different concepts, different approaches to motivate users to be engaged and active participant in these smart charging services.
That's great. That's really great. And I don't want to know the winner, but of course it's very interesting to see what happens in Luxembourg and in all the other use cases. We have to stop because we are almost running out of time of the total hour. I want to thank you both, and also, of course, Polis for organizing this webinar. We had a lot of people who listened and also who put in the chat their questions. If there are any questions that we didn't answer yet in this webinar, there will be a possibility to answer them via an email. So that maybe after the webinar, you will get an email with some answers. I will share my screen because I want to close the webinar with some next steps. I hope it will be visible on the screen. No, not yet. Sorry, I made a mistake. I have to go to screen 2.
It's good. We can see it.
Is it good? Okay. I don't see it myself. So I want to say to you that for the scale perspective, this was the last session of our summer webinars of this year. Of course, we are going into the winter time now here in Europe, so we will stop these webinars, but we will be back before next summer. And of course, you can also look back on all those 3 webinars of today and the last couple of months. The series is in the website of Scale. And of course, everything is also on LinkedIn, and you can also subscribe to the newsletter of Scale. And we think we will also organize a new series before next summer. We don't know the issues yet and the topics, but it is always related to smart charging and vehicle-to-grid. So we will see you next year. And yeah, I hope you had good time here in these webinars. And please reach out to us if you have any questions, also via the email, for example, or via Twitter or via LinkedIn. Thank you all. And again, thank you, Paulus, for organizing. Thank you, Inge and Evangelos, for the very nice introductions and presentations of today. Bye-bye.